And the king of Edom died in those days, in the 18th year of his reign, and was buried in his temple, which he had built for himself as his royal residence in the land of Edom. And the children of Esau sent to Pethor, which is up on the river, and they fetched from him a young man of beautiful eyes and comely aspect, whose name was Saul. And they made him king over them in the place of Simeon. And Saul reigned over all the children of Esau in the land of Edom for 40 years. And when the Pharaoh king of Egypt saw that the counsel from Balaam had advised respecting the children of Israel did not succeed, but that they were fruitful, multiplied, and increased throughout the land of Egypt, then Pharaoh commanded in those days the proclamation should be issued throughout Egypt to the children of Israel, saying, no man shall diminish anything of his daily labor. And the man who shall be found deficient in his labor shall he perform daily, whether in mortar or in bricks. Again, his youngest son shall be put in their place. And the labor of Egypt strengthened upon the children of Israel in those days. And behold, if one brick was deficient in any man's daily labor, the Egyptians took his younger boy and by force from the mother and put him into the building in the place of the brick which his father had left one. So they used the children as bricks. In other words, if they made a mistake. Tough times, wasn't it? And the men of Egypt did so to all the children of Israel day by day, and the days for a long period. And the children of Levi did not at that time work with the Israelites, their brethren, from the beginning, for the children of Levi knew the coming of the Egyptians. They were exercised as first toward the Israelites. They knew better than to work for them. They never got started. And in the 3rd year from the birth of Moses, Pharaoh was sitting at a banquet when Alpaphraneth, the queen, was sitting at his right hand, and Bathia at his left. And the lad Moses was lying upon her bosom, and Balaam, the son of Peor, with his 2 sons, and all the princes of the kingdom were sitting at the table in the king's presence. And the lad stretched forth his hand upon the king's head and took the crown from the king's head and placed it on his own head. Baby Moses took the crown of Pharaoh and placed it on his own head. And when the king and the princes saw the work which the boy had done, the king and his princes were terrified. And one man to his neighbor expressed astonishment. And the king said unto the princes who were before him at the table, what speak you? What say you, O ye princes, in this matter, that to be in judgment against this boy on account of this act? And Balaam the son of Beor, the magician, answered before the king and the princes, and he said, remember now, O my king, O Lord, the dream from which thou didst dream many days since, that which thy servant interpreted unto thee. Now therefore, this is a child from the Hebrew children, in whom is the Spirit of God. And let not my Lord the king imagine that the youngster did this thing without knowledge, for he is a Hebrew boy, and wisdom and understanding are with him, although he is yet a child. And with wisdom he had undone this thing. and chosen unto himself the kingdom of Egypt. For this is the manner of all the Hebrew to deceive kings and their nobles, to do all these things cunningly, in order to make the kings of the earth and their men to tremble. Surely thou knowest that Abraham, their father, acted thus, and deceived the army of Nimrod, king of Babel, and Amalek, king of Gera. And he also possessed himself of the land of the children of Heth, and all the kingdom of Canaan, and that he descended into Egypt, and said of Sarah his wife, she is my sister, in order to mislead Egypt and her king. And his son Isaac also did so. And when he went to Gera and dwelt therein, and his strength prevailed over the army of Abimelech, king of the Philistines, he also thought of making the kingdom of the Philistines stubble, in saying that Rebekah his wife was his sister. Jacob also dealt treacherously with his brother, and took from him his hand, his birthright, and his blessing. Esau he's talking about. And he went then to Padan, sold the house of Laban and his mother's brother, and cunningly obtained from his daughter his cattle and all belonging to him, and fled away, and returned to the land of Canaan to his father. His son sold his brother Joseph, who went down to Egypt and became a slave, and was placed in the prison house for 12 years, until the former Pharaoh dreamed dreams, and withdrew him from the prison house, and also magnified him above all the princes of Egypt on account of interpreting his dreams to him. And when God caused a famine throughout the land, he sent for and brought his father and all his brethren, and the whole of his father's house, and behold, supported them without price or reward, and brought the Egyptians for slaves. Now therefore, my Lord, King, behold, the child has risen up in thy stead in Egypt, and to do accordingly to their deeds, and to trifle with every king, prince, and judge. If it please the king, let us now spill his blood upon the ground. Let's kill him. Let's abort this baby, this toddler. If it please now the king, let us spill his blood upon the ground, lest he grow up and take away the government from thy hand, and the hope of Egypt perish. After he shall have reigned. And Balaam said to the king, let us moreover call for all the judges of Egypt, and thy wise men therefore, and let us know if the judgment of death is due to this boy, as thou didst say, when thee shall slay him. In other words, he shouldn't even be here anyway. Should have killed him a long time ago. And Pharaoh sent and called for all the wise men of Egypt. And they came before the king. And the angel of the Lord came amongst them. And he was like unto one of the wise men of Egypt. God snuck an angel in there. And the king said to the wise men, surely you have heard what this Hebrew boy who is in the house has done. And thus has Balaam judged on the matter. Now judge you also, and see what is due to the boy for the act which he had committed. And the angel, who seemed like one of the wise men of Pharaoh, answered and said as follows: Before all the wise men of Egypt, and before all the kings and princes, if it please the king, let the king send for men who shall bring before him an onyx stone and a coal of fire, and place them before the child. And if the child should stretch forth his hand and take the onyx stone, then you shall know that which the wisdom as the youth had done all that he has done, and he must slay him. But if he stretch forth his hand upon the coal, then shall you know that it was not with the knowledge that he did this thing, and he did, and he shall live. And the thing seemed good in the eyes of the king and the princes. So they're gonna put an onyx stone, a jewel that is found in the crown of the king. He said, if the child reach for that, we're gonna kill him, because this king deliberately, or this child deliberately knows he's going for the crown. Or if he grabs a coal and burns himself, well, we just had one of those haphazard things that he did. It was by accident. And the thing seemed good in the eyes of the king and the princes, as the king did according to the word of the angel of the Lord. And the king ordered the onyx stone and the coal to be brought and placed before Moses. And they placed the boy before them. And the lad endeavored to stretch forth his hand to the onyx stone, but the angel of the Lord took the hand and placed it upon the coal. And the coal became extinguished in his hand. And he lifted it up and put it to his mouth, and burned part of his lips and part of his tongue. And he became heavy in mouth and tongue. And remember when Moses was confronting God and he said, that I have a thick tongue or stutter. It's because of this injury as a child. He said, I'm not good at speech because of this injury. And when the king and the princes saw this, they knew that Moses had not acted with wisdom in taking of the crown from the king's head. And the king and princes retained from slaying the child. So Moses remained in the Pharaoh's house growing up, and the Lord was with him. And while the boy was in the king's house, he was robed in purple, and he grew among the children of the king. And when Moses grew up in the king's house, Bathia, the daughter of Pharaoh, ordered him as a son, and all the household of Pharaoh honored him, and all the men of Egypt were afraid of him. And he daily went forth and came into the land of Goshen, where his brethren and the children of Israel were. And Moses saw them daily, in shortness of breath and in hard labor. And Moses asked them, saying, Wherewith is the labor meted out unto you day by day? And they told him all that had befallen him, and all the injunctions which Pharaoh had put upon him before his birth. And they told him all the counsel which Balaam, the son of Beor, had counseled against him, and that he had counseled against him in order to slay him, when he had taken the king's crown from his head. And when Moses heard these things, his anger was kindled against Balaam, and he sought to kill him. And he was in ambush for him day by day. And Balaam was afraid of Moses. He and his 2 sons rose up and went forth from Egypt, and they fled and delivered their souls and betook themselves to the land of Cush, to Cacacius, king of Cush. And Moses was in the king's house, going out and coming in. And the Lord gave him favor in the eyes of Pharaoh, in the eyes of his servants, and in the eyes of the people of Egypt. And they loved Moses exceedingly. And the day arrived when Moses went to Goshen to see his brethren, that he saw the children of Israel in their burdens and hard labor. And Moses grieved on their account. And Moses returned to Egypt and came to the house of Pharaoh and came before the king. And Moses bowed down before the king. And Moses said unto Pharaoh, I pray thee, my Lord, I have come to seek a small request from thee. Turn not away my face empty. And Pharaoh said unto him, Speak. And Moses said to Pharaoh, Let there be given unto thy servant the children of Israel, who are in Goshen, one day rest therein from their labor. And the king answered Moses and said, Behold, I have lifted up my face in this thing to grant thy request. And Pharaoh ordered a proclamation to be issued throughout Egypt and Goshen, saying, To you all the children of Israel, thus saith the king, For 6 days you shall do your work and labor, but on the seventh day, here's the Sabbath right there, you shall rest, and you do all the days of the king. And Moses, the son of Bethuel, have commanded. And Moses rejoiced at this thing which the king had granted to him. And all the children of Israel did as Moses ordered them. And for this thing was from the Lord of the children of Israel. For the Lord had begun to remember the children of Israel, to save them for the sake of their fathers. And the Lord was with Moses, and his fame went throughout Egypt. And Moses became great in the sight of the Egyptians, and in the eyes of the children of Israel, seeking good for his people Israel, and speaking words of peace regarding them to the king. All right, we're going to leave off there, and we read to 71. We're in chapter 71, so we're going to stop right there. We're plowing through it. So you guys are getting a bigger picture of Moses, or a sharper picture of Moses, that you didn't get in the Bible. Excuse me, that's why we're reading the Apocrypha, to fill in those blanks. And you get to see why Moses had a problem and wanted Aaron to be his mouthpiece, because he had said, I have a thick tongue, I stutter. He had a speech impediment because of childhood injury. But see how God uses our imperfections, our quote-unquote handicaps for his good. There's no such thing as a defective child. Even a child is born that's mentally challenged or physically challenged. God can still use for his glory. As far as makes no excuse. Many great men that had handicaps throughout history, or some kind of birth defect or illness from birth that God used for his glory. Too many stories. That's why the right to life belongs to God. God is pro-life. Any child could be used for his glory. It could be a future king, a future scientist, or it could be a future prophet, a man of God. Just think if Moses was aborted, what a big hole in history that would have been. All right, if I'm the one that taught you, give. Go to streetpriestministry.org, hit the donate button. Tithes, first fruit, alabaster box belong to the Lord. Only if I taught you. If I didn't teach you anything, you don't owe anything. Galatians 6:6. If I taught you spiritual things, you get material things for what I taught you. That's how you lay up churches in heaven. Good day, good evening, good night to you around the world. May you grow in faith in Christ Jesus' mighty name.